report says the CIA warned Spanish police 2 months ago about a possible terrorist attack in Barcelona. This report comes after terrorists drove a van into pedestrians at a busy Barcelona tourist site, claiming 14 lives and injuring over 100 people. Could this have been prevented? I want to ask former CIA counterterrorism officer Buck Sexton. Good to see you here, Buck.
Good to see you, Trish.
We warned them. What do you think that we knew?
Well, it depends so much on the specificity of the threat. A lot of this is what you'd call chatter. It's just out there. They'll pick up somewhere that this may be one of a dozen targets that have been talked about in open jihadist forums, or they may have picked this up even from a source somewhere who just is passing on what's essentially a rumor. But because it's threat reporting, you have to make sure that when there's any specificity, you move it along. But unless you have a sense of timing and a sense of who may be involved, very difficult to prevent this kind of an attack. And I should note that the more reporting we see about this cell, which is at least 8 individuals now suspected to be tied into these attacks, the more it seems that this could have been much worse than it was. That in a sense, as much as there's been terrible carnage and loss of life, there could have been much greater loss of life.
And how do you know that it won't be, though? In other words, if members of that cell are still out there and they haven't caught them all, are they planning potentially their next move? I would think that intelligence officials are aggressively going after them to see all these tentacles right now.
I think the expectation is that whomever is still tied to this and whoever's out there, they'll try to make some kind of a last stand, and if they can, add to the toll of the dead and the wounded they've already put together with these attacks. So I think that we're going to be looking at connections. One of the big questions here will be, did these individuals have good tradecraft? Meaning, were they good at preventing the authorities from looking into their affairs? Did they not make any mistakes in their communications? Were they not sloppy? Because it seems like, given the size of the cell, the fact they're running an explosives factory in a house, were it not for that factory doing what in bomb-making circles they call an own goal, blowing up themselves by accident, they would have been able to create what we called in Iraq and Afghanistan VBIEDs, vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, essentially giant mobile bombs. That seems like it was the plan, which could have killed in the high hundreds, if not thousands, had they actually deployed them as it seems they were planning to.
It feels like there's very little you can do once it gets to that stage. I mean, in the case of Barcelona, Spain, even if they knew that there was a potential for some kind of attack in Les Ramblas, you can't necessarily just shut down the streets for months at a time while you try and thread that needle in a haystack, or find that needle in a haystack. So how do you do it? I guess you just have to have much better intelligence.
Well, you put a greater police presence on the streets, both uniformed and non-uniformed. You try to work with the intelligence services to run informants in jihadist circles, because finding the terrorists in this case, especially when you're talking about vehicular attacks, is so much more important than trying to prevent vehicle attacks all across a major city or all across a country. So that's a major component of all of this. I think also what we're going to see is that there were probably ties to established jihadists outside of Spain. There was probably communication with, if not directly, the Islamic State, people that have direct ties to the Islamic State, and they may have, and I think this is just my sense of it, an analysis based on the fact that they were trying to build these complex devices, trying to build explosive vehicles. They may have had help at stages in this process. And had they not gone awry with this, by the way, had they just gone with vehicles instead of these explosives, they may have killed many more people.
It's scary stuff. Anyway, good to see you, Buck Sexton.